Kamala Harris can fuck all the way off. I see her getting a bit of airplay recently, and I don't like her. She was a cop. That, in and of itself, I think is problematic. And at the end of the day, locking people up that the judge told her to release. I mean, the what is the other thing? Keeping people in prison so they can work for like 12 cents an hour or whatever. Keeping a man on death row. Oh, that's onerous. Locking people up for marijuana and laughing about it. I mean, it's one horrible thing after the next. She is pushing to be VP. She knows that with the Floyd murder, that Joe Biden may be amenable to a female vice president who is a person of color. And she knows she may be on the short list for that job. Now, the problem is she's a cop. And the fact that Floyd was murdered by a cop, that may not look good. But at the same token, Joe Biden may not mind that at all, considering he was the one that authored the crime bill. And whatever he's saying about criminal justice now, he doesn't necessarily believe. He spent his entire life saying the opposite. But for me, and from the standpoint, I think, humbly, speak from the left, fuck off. I'm going to show you why I have such hostility towards Kamala Harris. Welcome. Early morning, blurry-eyed, real men can't sleep, real men do the news, soapbox.
That we would not be taking the issue of lynching seriously is an insult to Senator Booker, to Senator Tim Scott and myself, and all of the senators, past and present, who have understood this is part of the great stain of America's history. To suggest that anything short of pulverizing someone so much that the casket would otherwise be closed except for the heroism and courage of Emmett Till's mother, to suggest that lynching would only be a lynching if someone's heart was pulled out and produced and displayed to someone else is ridiculous. And on this day, the day of George Floyd's funeral, on this day, a day that should be a day of national mourning.
Invocation of George Floyd. Nice. Nice touch. Nice touch. Let's talk about absolute reality here. Just flat fact reality. I'm just talking about bare bones reality. There's a human being. She's standing there. She's speaking in defense of a lynching bill. And I think Rand Paul got in the way or something. Rand Paul, libertarian. And she's making this argument about lynching. Now, it's 2020. And I understand that it's symbolic. But it's 2020. And the fact of the matter is, lynching, killing someone, is already against the law. You can make an extra law about it, fair enough. But lynching is already against the law. And I would wager that if someone lynches someone, the prosecutor is going to look for every charge in the book to hit them with if it is indeed a prosecutor that cared about human life. Prosecutors can find all sorts of shit to add on charges to make that charge stick and make it hurt. So it's not that I'm against them doing that. Okay, fair enough. But let's just be clear. It is a symbolic gesture. It's performative. Even the invocation of Floyd, performative. She wanted to get that soundbite in. Yes, she is that craven. So fair enough. Symbolic. This is not symbolic. This is real world, real affecting of individuals and human beings, just like you, just like me. And it's utterly and entirely heinous, especially the way she laughs her way through it.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my reelection race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it. And this is what we did. We recognized that in that initiative, as a prosecutor and law enforcement, I have a huge stick. The school district has got a carrot. Let's work in tandem around our collective objective and goal, which is to get those kids in school. So, to that end, on my letterhead, now let me tell you something about my letterhead. When you're the DA of a major city in this country, usually the job comes with a badge. And there is often an artistic rendering of said badge on your stationery. So I sent a letter out on my letterhead to every parent in the school district, outlining the connection that was statistically proven between elementary school truancy, high school dropouts, who will become a victim of crime, and who will become a perpetrator of crime. We sent it out to everyone. A friend of mine actually called me and he said, Kamala, my wife got the letter. She freaked out. She brought all the kids into the living room, held up the letter, said, if you don't go to school, Kamala's gonna put you and me in jail. Yes, we achieved intended effect.
That's horrendous. I'm sorry, I hear that, and I cringe at that. And she laughs her way through it, which makes it that much worse, because she doesn't fundamentally get on a gut level what she is saying and what it means. Kamala Harris basically is saying, as a prosecutor, I went after parents who had kids for truancy violations. I went to prosecute and to put people in jail. Now, when you say that and you think for the moment, who do you think will be most likely to have truancy violations? Kids with fucked up homes or with difficulty in their homes, maybe not being able to get from point A to point B, maybe a parent that's not necessarily there, maybe issues of poverty, despair issues. And if that's true, and you end up in a situation where you're basically going after people, I'm done with the performative stuff. I don't care. I'm sorry. I don't care about that bill. I get it. I understand the symbolism of it. I would love it if it was passed. I have no feelings if it's not. I do care about real human beings that you were terrorizing who were basically poor. And to put this in perspective, the first thing I did when I read this, I looked up stats on poverty and truancy, because my first impression would be, well, yeah, if there's a home that's intact versus one that is not, or there's a home that is having difficult straits, yeah, parents are working, maybe a latchkey kid, fair enough. I was a latchkey kid. My mom had to work, and I had to come home on my own. I was an odd kid, so I was a little off kilter. But my mom was one of those people who made $18,000 or less. Understand, 44% of the population before this hit made $18,000. Oh, I can't imagine that. And actually, I can't imagine that because I lived it. She got out of high school and started working immediately. She had no issue. She didn't want to necessarily be a manager. She didn't necessarily want to be in a rat race. She had one issue. I want to take care of my kid. And that's what she did, single mom. $8, if I'm not mistaken. 18,000 or less is like $10. So she had to raise a kid off of like $8. When she finally retired, I think she was making like $13 an hour, barely over that 18,000. there was no situation in which she had, let's say, her window of catastrophe was wider, just by definition. Anything that happened, a speeding ticket, oh, that's horrendous. There's no money in the bank to pay that speeding ticket, let alone anything else. Like, I'm making a point to you that that living situation is horrendous. The stress that she was under, it shows on her. It's hard to get that across. There are times when she would cry over this stuff, but she was. I guess my point is, this is not something that is healthy for society to have. So it's a study conducted at Johns Hopkins University in May of last year. In low-income communities, it's normal to find a quarter of the class missing every day, with some students missing in 30 to 40 days a year. And here's the other part. Chronic absenteeism, missing more than 10% of the school score, rates 3 to 4 times higher in poverty areas. All right. Now, process what you just heard. It rates 3 to 4 times higher in poverty-stricken areas with what she just said. Because what that means, she's terrorizing poor people at a higher rate. If it's San Francisco is any measure, 3 to 4 times. That's horrendous. You've basically picked a section of your community to go after. They don't have the money to put up any kind of legal thing, so they're basically stuck at the whims of the state. And the issue here is the poverty, not the fact that they're bad parents. I guess I'm making the very basic point that if these communities were thriving, does this number still hold? And if that number still holds, that means that those communities, by definition, will have less of this issue. I mean, by logical extension, right? If truancy is higher 3 to 4 times in communities that are poor and poverty stricken, by definition, if the community was thriving, it would not fit into that particular thing of poor and poverty stricken, which means it would not have those high numbers. The issue is the poverty. If you can't deal with that, then you should not be attacking those parents. It's not a factor of anything else other than finances, economics. God, I hate that. That's so aggravating. Like, that's mind-blowing. It's like the stress of everything else. And then you have Kamala Harris, who wants to get some kind of political stunt going by terrorizing parents who can't necessarily afford to defend themselves. It's that rose and was commiserate. I have a hard time saying that word. I know exactly how the word is spelled and everything else. I just have a hard time saying it. That's commiserate with what those people should be getting. But we don't. Because the people who are in power are people of means. And because they are people of means, they have a point of view that caters other people like them. Not to mention, from the standpoint of the jobs or opportunities, paychecks, those are also by people of means. The people, it's astonishing we allow it. That's all. That's all. I mean, consider for the moment. Pick a person of means. This country founded, committed an atrocity. Native Americans committed another atrocity, slavery. Yada, yada, yada. You get to now where you have this, a different type of plantation. A type of plantation where it's like, okay, you could choose your plantation, but it's still a goddamn plantation. And many of the vestiges are practically there for slavery. Whites have joined in this process, and a ton of cheap labor, as opposed to free labor, has taken place. So you have billionaires with dirt poor workers, some of which get government services which means that they are basically freeloading off the government because the company is not paying them a decent wage. Like I said, my mom was one of those people who was making under that much. It is a difficult, difficult life, to put it mildly. And this is something that we visit on various people, despite the fact that those people do not exist. Flat fact. Without someone buying their products or shopping at their stores, without a fire department to put out fires when that erupts, like the one at Amazon, without a police department to ensure that no one steals their stuff, or when someone does, that that person is prosecuted, meaning having force of law to back up the company itself. Clean air, educated workforce. I mean, after all, those are public schools. So educated workforce. They don't exist without that. It is a horrendous thing that we believe, or that we accept, that it is okay for them to have that much wealth. They have not earned that much wealth, in comparison to the fact that their workers are the ones that's producing it. Put it this way. If Jeff Bezos croaked tomorrow and a law was passed giving Amazon to the workers, Amazon would do just fine. Those workers could run that. They can figure out how they want to organize labor. They can come up with committees or whatever, and they can do the job. They can, and one thing they won't do is sell it overseas. I guess my point that I'm trying to make is the crucial element to their wealth is those workers. And if that's true, which it absolutely is, and not just those workers, I extend this to the people who are shopping at their stores and whatnot, because that is the element to which they get their wealth. Those are just human beings. Those people aren't rich, but they are infinitely required for that person to get wealthy. Why is it fair, if that's true, that he gets to expropriate that much wealth and leave people making like $15? That's obscene. And yet, here we are. I'll leave this here. Like, share, subscribe.